All right, Chapter 5 test review. Well, when I look back here at the Chapter 5 review and test, the review problems, I like them. They're great review problems. You should do the chapter review one day, and that's a reasonable assignment for one day. And you should know how to do those problems. You shouldn't have any issues there. And the chapter test, also really good selection of problems, covers the skills, not crazy long. And my guess is that the chapter test that they put out that I will be giving to you is very much like the chapter review or the chapter test. If I were you, I would do 5-6 on Monday, 5-7 on Tuesday, do a chapter review, do a chapter test, and you'll have one more study day. And then next week, next Monday, you will be taking I'm expecting that I'm giving you 4 sections, 5-6, 5-7, chapter review, chapter test. Those 4 sections, you have 5 days to complete, basically. So you have an extra day in there, but I would be using it for studying. And I'm going to do a study guide right now of some extra questions that I'm going to have separately that you're going to have to do. First, you will have to derive the quadratic formula. They probably won't have it on the test. I will probably make deriving the quadratic formula its own test, meaning I will hand you a blank piece of paper, or your mom will hand you a blank piece of paper, and you will have to write down each step from where you start to get the quadratic formula and where you end. I will not give you anything but a blank piece of paper. There is a video up called Deriving the Quadratic Formula. I suggest you watch it. And I'm going to require that next to your steps, you write down something, some type of brief description or something that tells me what you're doing. So I would practice that. I would go over that video. I would make sure that I can pull out a white piece of paper and do that. You have to derive the quadratic formula. 2, you need to start getting familiar with terminology. So x-intercept, root, solution. These are all words that mean the exact same thing. When you're looking for a solution, generally speaking, you're looking for where y equals 0. Okay, y equals 0, x-intercept, root, solution, these are all talking about the same thing. You probably haven't seen the word root or solution very often, but when you go to solve a problem, what's the first step of solving? Setting it equal to 0. Why is that? Because we have y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. When I want to solve it, I want to find a solution, the first thing I do is I set it equal to 0. Or, most of the time I'm going to do that if y is actually a value. I'm going to move the y over. But the idea is I'm going to set this thing to 0 right away as if y was 0. Third, you need to make the jump very quickly. That when we're talking about the y-intercept, what I'm really saying is that x is 0. And when I'm talking about the x-intercept, what I'm really saying is that y is 0. These are very important things. And probably the last thing that I'll be looking for you to know on this test that's not in the book, and that's going to be one of my personal questions to you: how do you solve an equation? All right? You solve an equation, first you set it equal to 0. Then you factor. Now, there are many ways to factor, which gives me, I'll have one more thing for you. But you factor, and then you find solutions, okay? For example, if I factored and I got down to x minus 3, x plus 4 is 0. When I'm in this final step of finding solutions, well, anytime I have 2 things multiplied times each other to equal 0, one of them must be 0. You can't have 2 non-zero numbers multiplied together to get 0. That just can't happen. One of these must be 0. So either x minus 3 is 0 or x plus 4 is 0. One of those 2 things must be true. And so either x equals 3 or x equals negative 4. One of these 2 things. That's what I mean when I say find solutions. So we set it equal to 0. Notice my 0 there. Factor it. Notice it's factored. And then I find my solutions. Now, factoring. These 2 steps can run together if you're using the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula just kind of spits out your answers right off the bat. Okay, but you also need to know that there's multiple ways to factor. Okay? Factor. How can you do it? One, you can pull out a common factor. 2. I always call this unfoiling because that's really what my students would do. Like if I had x squared plus 2x plus 1, when I break this down to x plus 1 times x plus 1, I call that unfoiling because they were very comfortable with the idea of this going from here up was foiling. So unfoiling was that way down. That's not the technical term, but that's what we're going to call it for right now, and you can put that on your test as well. So you can unfoil it. 3, you have special things like the difference of 2 squares. Actually, that's just part of number 2. Number 2, and this is part of number 2. This is part of number 2. Okay. 3rd, you can complete the square, and we do a lot of completing the square right now to get it into vertex form. And lastly, for right now, although there's more ways you can factor, but for right now, the last way is you can use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula will always give you solutions. And that's the whole point of factoring. You factor so that you can get to the point that you can find solutions. Quadratic formula tends to do that in one step. You put it in, you get your solutions out. You need to know this stuff for the test, as well as do the review and the test. This should be an easier chapter, especially after working so much on equations last chapter. I cannot stress to you enough how important it is that you do the chapter review and the test, and you make sure you understand what you're doing there before you start the test. Remember, tests are always closed book unless I've written on the test, open book test. So closed book, do not consult your notes. If you do horrible, you do horrible. I need to see that test. I need to get that test so I know you're doing horrible. And I know it's hard, but you need to do it that way. Good luck.